Now turn to Part 1.
You'll hear a telephone conversation. Now you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. Listen to the conversation and answer questions 1 to 6.
Good morning, Country Comfort Albury.
Oh, hi. I'd like some information, please. I'd like to find a double room to stay for the weekend. What kind of rooms do you have?
Well, we provide a variety range of accommodation depending upon your likes. The guest house room costs $45 per night. It provides air conditioning and shower, and a waterfront room costs $80 per night. It has got its own balcony overlooking the foreshore of the lake.
We've got a kid. How do you charge for children?
Extra bedding is available if you require that. If the kid is aged 12 and below, the cost is $10 per night for the guest house room and $15 for the waterfront room.
Do you have a swimming pool, tennis court or something like that?
Yes, we've got a swimming pool which is free for all the guests, but the tennis court charges $8 each hour, including the rent of rackets.
How about other facilities?
We provide free off-street car parking and internet access. We also installed in-house movies, but that costs $4 per hour.
Oh, we don't think we need that. Because of the kid, you know. We don't want him to see movies on the weekend.
Well, we also offer ironing equipment in the room. That's useful, I think.
Before listening to the rest of the conversation, you have some time to go through the questions 7 to 10. Now listen to the last part of the conversation and answer questions 7 to 10. Great! Could you tell me the address? How do we get there?
Yes, it's Country Comfort Albury, Albury, at 648 Dean Street, New South Wales.
648 Dean Street, Dean, is that right?
Yes.
Well, I wonder what activities are available there in this season. You know, we want to have an indulgent weekend in the boring winter.
Oh, you'll not get bored here. You know, Albury is the perfect base for alpine skiing. Besides that, winter's frosty alpine air encourages walks through mist-laden valleys. You can walk alongside rushing streams and waterfalls. After returning to the warm and comfortable lounge, you can sit by the open fire. I think this is the ideal time of year to nourish your body at the Salus Spa.
The idea of skiing doesn't appeal to me very much, but it sounds good to have a relaxing walk through the valleys. Maybe after that, I'll have a massage and some soaking in the spa.
And you know, this hotel is perfectly located in a quiet position off the main highway in central Albury. It's within walking distance of licensed clubs, restaurants, shops, and the central business district. It's known for its excellent cuisine and warm Australian hospitality.
Good. It's a good idea to taste the tasty dishes in one of the restaurants. My wife may be interested in shopping. She's always keen on that. I think I'll contact you later. Thank you very much.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2. You'll hear a guide talking to visitors about a tourist attraction. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Roman Baths. My name's Amanda, and I'm your guide for today. Before we begin the tour, I'd like to point out that we have child carriers, free of charge, of course, for those of you with young children, and I can see that there are 1 or 2 of you here this morning. It might make things a bit easier for you than using a pushchair. If you don't want to carry your coats and bags around with you, there is a cloakroom behind reception where they'll be quite safe. Also, should anyone want to use the bathroom, there's one here in the reception hall, opposite the ticket office, and another one by the shop where we end our tour, right by the exit. Having mentioned the shop, I should tell you that it's full of interesting things for you to remember your visit by. Posters, postcards, replicas of the Gorgon's head, the Haruspex stone, and the statues that you'll be seeing on your tour. There are also games, books and videos for children and other souvenirs. Our first stop will be the terrace, where you will get your first view of the baths. Now, the statues that line the terrace here are of Roman emperors, governors of Britain and various military leaders. These aren't from Roman times either. In fact, they were sculpted in 1894, especially for the grand opening of the baths in 1897. But what you can see from here is only a fraction of the whole Roman bath site, which stretches below ground level under the surrounding streets and squares of the town. While we're here on the terrace, getting our first look at the baths, let me fill you in on a bit of the history. This site, with its hot springs, has long been seen as a sacred place, and the first people to build here were the Celts, and the shrine they built was dedicated to the goddess Sulis. Of course, back in those days, they had no way of explaining how hot water came to be bubbling out of the ground, so they believed it to be the work of the gods. When the Romans came, they too built a temple here and dedicated it to their goddess, Minerva. Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20. The bath you can see from here is called the Great Bath. Not very imaginative, I know, but it is the biggest. Impressive, isn't it? At one time it was housed in a huge vaulted hall 40 metres high, which for many people of the period must have been the largest building they'd ever seen in their lives. The bath itself is 1.6 metres deep, ideal for bathing, and has steps leading down to the water on all sides. The niches or alcoves you can see all around the bath would have had benches and possibly small tables for drinks and snacks. Not a bad way to spend your free time, relax, and tell yourself it's all good for your health. Let's move on to our next stop, the Sacred Spring. This is the heart of the site, where the hot water bubbles up from the ground at a temperature of 46 degrees centigrade. The water comes up from a depth of between roughly 2,500 and 4,500 metres, where geothermal energy raises the water temperature to between 64 degrees and 96 degrees. Over 1 million litres of this hot water rise up here every day, and as well as being hot, the water is rich in minerals, and it was thought it would cure various ailments and illnesses. In fact, people came here from all over the Roman Empire to try out its healing powers. Before we take a look at the changing rooms and saunas, which are known as the East Baths, and the plunge pools and heated rooms of the west part of the bathhouse, we'll pass through the site of the temple and the temple courtyard. Here we are. This temple is one of only 2 known classical Roman temples in Britain. The other is the Temple of Claudius at Colchester. This temple is said to date from the late 1st century AD, being built between 60 and 70 AD. But the original temple has been knocked about and added to over the centuries, and what you can see here are just bits of the original temple. OK, shall we move on?
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
Mr. Jackson, who feels that he is physically unfit, is consulting with his doctor about his health condition. Before you listen to their conversation, you have a chance to read questions 21 to 24. Now please listen to the recording and answer questions 21 to 24.
Well, Mr. Jackson, the first and important thing I have to tell you is that there is really nothing seriously wrong with you. Physically, that is. My very thorough re-examination and the analyst's report show that basically you are very fit. Yes, very fit.
So, why is it, Doctor, that I'm always so nervy, tense, ready to jump on anybody? My wife, children, colleagues.
I think your condition has a lot to do with, shall we call it, way of life, habits?
Way of life? Habits?
Yes, now tell me, Mr. Jackson, you smoke, don't you?
Yes, I'm afraid I do, Doctor.
And rather heavily, I imagine.
Well, yes. I smoke, about 40, 50 a day, I suppose.
You should do your best to stop, you know.
Yes, I see. But, well, it won't be the first time. I've tried to give up smoking several times, but it's no good.
You see, 50 a day is overdoing it, you must admit. You must cut down at least that. Ah, yes. I know that when you're feeling tense, you probably feel that a cigarette relaxes you. But in the long run, I do advise you to make a real effort to quit smoking.
Of course, but, well, it's easy to say give it up or cut it down, but, you know.
Well, in my opinion, you have no choice. Either you make a real effort or there's no real chance of your feeling better. You see, well, obviously I could prescribe some kind of tranquilizer, but would that help? I'd prefer, and I'm quite sure you'll agree, I'd prefer to see you really back to normal, not just seemingly so. And that's my reason for asking you several more questions about your other habits.
Right.
Now you have a chance to read questions 25 to 30. As you listen to more of their conversation, answer questions 25 to 30.
Your eating habits, for example. What do you eat normally, during a normal day?
Yes, well, I'm a good eater. Yes, I'd say I'm a good eater. Now let's see. Up at 8 in the morning, and my wife has a good breakfast ready.
A good breakfast.
The usual, a cereal followed by bacon and eggs with fried bread and perhaps a tomato or two. Then toast and marmalade, all washed down with a couple of cups of tea. Yes, I really enjoy my breakfast.
Yes, I can see you do, but I'd advise you to eat rather less. We'll come to that later. Go on.
Then lunch. No, first brunch. A cup of coffee and a bun at 11. Lunch has to be quick, because there's so much to do in the office about that time, so I have a pint and a sandwich in the pub. All very hurried.
Try to be in less of a hurry.
But I make up for it in the evening. I get home at about 7. Dinner's around about 8. Yes, my wife's an excellent cook. Excellent. It's usually some meat dish, and we like spaghetti as a first course. Spaghetti, a meat dish, cheese, sweet. But then, at the end of the day, shall we say, then I begin to feel on edge again. Most evenings after dinner we read or watch TV, but I get this terrible feeling of tension.
Well, I'm sorry to have to say this because you obviously enjoy your food, but I really do recommend that you eat less, and secondly, that you eat more healthily. Instead of having that enormous breakfast, for example, try to be content with fruit juice and some cereal.
I see, but
11 says right. Well, that's all right, but lunch should be more leisurely. Remember, your health is at stake, not your job. As for dinner, I'd advise you to eat a soup, perhaps, with a salad. A salad followed by some fruit.
But my wife's cooking
Is superb, granted. And she probably enjoys preparing delicious meals for you. If you like, I'll have a word with your wife.
No, that won't be necessary. Thanks just the same, Doctor, but no.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have 30 seconds to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
You will hear a wildlife expert giving a talk to a group of bird lovers in the UK about a species called the tawny owl. Before you listen, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good evening, everyone. You're all likely to be familiar with pictures of the tawny owl. Because of all the owl species in the UK, it's actually the most common one. But the chances are that you're more likely to have heard one than actually seen one, as it's also strongly nocturnal. This means that it normally ventures out at night. So, what kind of habitat does the tawny owl prefer? Well, a survey carried out in the 1980s confirmed that this owl is most likely to be found in woodland. If you look at a map of tawny owl distribution across Britain, you'll only see gaps in the treeless marshy areas of eastern England and in some of the more upland parts of northwest Scotland. However, you can sometimes find populations of tawny owls in urban areas too, either in parks or in large gardens. The tawny owl shows some obvious adaptations to its natural habitat. For example, both its wings and its tail are short, which helps it to manoeuvre through the trees. Also, the bird's plumage is a mixture of brown and grey, and this provides suitable camouflage for when the owl perches up against a tree trunk. Then there are its large eyes. The tawny owl's visual capacities are considerably better than those of humans, and although it can't see in complete darkness, it's sufficiently well equipped to be able to navigate its way around woodland on all but the most overcast nights. Another factor that contributes to the tawny owl's success as a hunter is its excellent memory of the layout of different areas. If you combine this ability with the owl's strongly territorial and sedentary nature, most populations of tawny owl are sit-and-wait predators, you realize that it has a good opportunity to predict where prey might be found. Finally, as well as having large eyes, the owl's sense of hearing is excellent, and this helps it to locate potential prey as it sits on its perch. Turning now to the tawny owl's diet. Woodland tawny owls feed mainly on mammals, especially small ones, such as wood mice and bank voles. But they'll also take things like frogs or bats, or even fish, if they happen to be available. In urbanized landscapes, the owls seem to prey more on birds. So there are some differences there. Let's just look briefly now at survival rates in the tawny owl. Young tawny owls face a difficult time once they leave home, and 2 out of every 3 are likely to die within their first year. So, with such high mortality levels, it's a good job that established breeding pairs can produce young over a number of seasons and maximize their chances of passing their genes on to the next generation of owls. I've already mentioned the sedentary nature of the tawny owl, but it's not just adult tawny owls that are sedentary in their habits. Young birds, dispersing away from where they were born, rarely move far. The average distance is just 4 kilometres. There also appears to be some reluctance to cross large bodies of water. The owl is absent from many of the islands around our shores, with only occasional sightings in Ireland and the Isle of Wight off the south coast of England. Right, well, now I'll show you some photographs that have been taken in one or two of the...
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.